Switcheroo! Disney twins play master matchmaker, but with complexity. They thought we wouldn't notice, but we did!
I understood that reference.
This show contains spoilers for The Acolyte, episodes 1 through 6. Hi, I'm Peter.
And I'm Devan, and this is I Am No Acolyte. Today we'll be discussing episode 6, Teach/Corrupt.
I'm still not done with this twins thing. I mean, I'm adding to what the guy before me was saying, but
Who was
like,
that guy?
seriously, who was that guy? Yeah, seriously, they're all psychic, and mainly angry at Soul here. Soul doesn't notice for like the whole episode. They're psychic, and no one can tell they're twins when they switch them? This is a big reach for us to pull off the next Hayley Mills, Mary-Kate and Ashley, Lindsay Lohan, Disney, we're twins, but we've switched places joke. Like,
But how
that's what
are
this
you
is.
supposed to do a proper parent trap if everybody knows that you've switched?
I mean,
like, think of how short...
I was just joking about noticing the trope, but you're right. What are they trying to get the masters to make out?
They're like,
Would we be mad?
no kiss. Seriously, though, I'm not entirely convinced that Soul didn't know it was May from the beginning. There's things that would make sense with that, and there's things that wouldn't. But, like, my first cue was, like, in the very beginning when she first comes out of the woods and is like, come on, let's go. And he's like, where's your sister? He doesn't say, where's May? He says, where's your sister? And I was like, does he kind of know? But then also he just, like, leaves Osha. Like, if he does know that it's May, then he just, like, totally abandons Osha to the forest, so, which seems out of character, although...
That seems a bit
But
out
there's
of
also a lot of
character,
dark stuff going on with Soul that we don't know about, so who knows?
Yeah. Despite how distracting this obsession of mine is that they're doing the twin thing, it does bring us to the fact that we have a couple unresolved details from before that have garnered some suspicion. There's particularly the Soul and May mystery here. You had a line, I've accepted my darkness, what have you done with yours?
Love that
We're still
line.
wondering what that's going to reveal. I had pointed out May's really demonstrating in the argument that she had with Osha at the end of the last episode. She was demonstrating her lack of truth by spelling out that her love is literally conditional, which is pretty narcissistic. And we're still wondering, how does Soul suck?
We know he sucks somehow, but how?
Yeah. Just like you were saying with the, would he have left Osha if he knew, like, he did just leave Jecky's body for a very vague, we must get to the ship. Like, okay, bro.
Yeah.
Like,
There's definitely some kind of darkness underlying Soul that is yet to be revealed, which is obvious. The depth and exact shape that takes is still a total mystery. So, yeah. I don't know.
I think he's also hiding something.
Oh, he's 100% hiding something.
Something he did that was bad.
Absolutely.
It's definitely obvious, but it's not like he's covering up. There's no nuance. He did something bad.
Yeah, and we kind of see, like, throughout the course of this episode in particular, a little bit of change in him and his demeanor, and Lee Jung-jae's acting ability is just, like, really showcased well in this episode, I think, because you see him kind of go from the Soul that we've seen that's, like, heroic to, like, you start seeing these bits of underlying darkness or these bits of different things. Like, when he goes back, there's a moment when he, like, pounds his fist on the thing and you can see how, like, really upset he is, which is a level of, like, emotional reaction that we don't typically see Jedi Masters display for, like, Jedi reasons. But we see that from him here, and it seems like it's, you know, he's just releasing this emotion that he's, like, really upset that his whole team just died. And maybe it's that. But that could also be that he's upset about something else. He's frustrated that his, whatever secret he has is going to come out. He's frustrated that maybe he's got some plan that's falling apart, or, like, it could be a couple of different things. And then by the time we get to the end of this episode, when he's got May restrained and he's like, look, bitch, I've got some stuff to say and you're going to listen to it. Like, you see this kind of darkness creeping out that you're like, oh, he's getting a little bit scary. Like, he doesn't feel like a warm, like, safe master kind of person anymore. It's kind of like, oh, this is a little you get more of like an edge from him. That's that's a little scary. So yeah, where is this going? I don't know. I can't wait to find out.
So your overall impression of the episode was liking the intrigue. You want to elaborate on that?
Yeah. It's mostly I think it's building up to something that I'm really excited to see what it's building up to. I think for an episode that didn't have a lot of actual action, it had a lot of what I felt was really good build up in a tension building mystery scape kind of way.
I liked what was going on with Osha and Darth Biceps throughout this episode.
Yes.
I had the opposite reaction to what was going on with Sol and May because for
Really?
so much of it, yeah, for so much of it he didn't know, which I think is very dumb.
Yeah.
And then when he reveals that he does know, at the end of the episode, he's like, and to be continued. So my hot take was this was a big no character or plot advancements were really made for Sol and May. And they were just like, we're trying to get our pacing right, and I'm like, I can see that. But the moment is already here for you to do your big reveal. No, we don't want to do it until it happens at the same time as this other thing. I'm like, yeah, you wrote yourself into a corner. You literally had to like force a whole episode of filler with Sol and May in this episode. There were so many. Oh, can you go get the toilet plunger from the back of the spaceship? Like at the last second when she's about to sneak up on him, and she's just like, yeah, sure. And I was just like, what is this?
See, this episode to me, I wonder how much of it is filler and how this strikes me as the kind of episode that we're gonna go back and rewatch and we're gonna notice more stuff. Like once more things have been revealed, I think there's a lot of interactions in this episode that will have more meaning once we know more things. Maybe I'm wrong.
I'm still believing the maybe part of that is my keyword. I'm like, or this is just an episode where they wanted our brains to like melt into our feet for a hot second because they were like told you have to make 8 episodes, and they were like, we really have enough story for 6.5. Like,
right.
Yeah, which is fine. It is fine. I know what it's like to deal with people who are like, but do this instead, and you're like, that doesn't work, and they're like, do it anyways.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's probably what they were dealing with. To be totally fair, I'm just saying, we noticed. I thought we would have noticed, but we did.
That man's
Disney
playing
twins!
Gallica.
So theories from this episode.
Yeah.
Let's start with everybody's favorite, Darth Biceps.
Okay, here's my theory. I don't necessarily want this to be the case, but my current working theory is that Vernestra was his master.
Ooh, that's cool.
It is and it isn't.
You've read everything. Does anything potentially support that possibility?
It doesn't, which is the part of that theory that I don't like. Because that would be a huge departure from her character in the books. Now,
we don't like that.
Yeah. Well, how could we do that?
It's totally unacceptable.
I know.
Let's take the previous things from the history of what was fictional and change them. Oh no.
No,
completely unacceptable.
No.
Especially to this fan base. Like,
exactly.
What are we doing comparing movies to older fictional lore and being like, oh, but it doesn't line up? It's like, this isn't historical fiction. It's just not.
Right.
What are we upset about?
Yeah,
Sorry.
and I think like one of the differences though I think is when people are like comparing older legend stuff to the stuff that's coming out now is like that those are like coming out in very different time periods. Like old legend stuff wasn't written with the intention of having it tie into like shows that are being made today or anything like that. Like the High Republic books have just come out and are being written right now, and then this show is coming out. Like there's a lot more intention being put behind, like they're all intended to be part of the same canon. There's a lot more intention being put behind having like multimedia tie-ins across these things. So to have it be that much of a disconnect would feel weird unless there's a good reason for it, which maybe there is. So I'm interested to see what that potentially would be, and maybe that doesn't come out in this. Maybe it's in books that are still out still to come,
Yeah.
or like something like that. Maybe it's going to be some like, because there's roughly 100 years or so in between, so there's plenty of time for like things to change.
Yeah.
I just would be curious to see what those things would be. But um, things that make me think that that's where this is headed is when we see Vernestra, when she sees like the destruction that has been wrought, and that other Jedi is like what or who like could have done this, and you see she's got kind of this look on her face that has that sort of remembering, like she's thinking of something that's like, oh shit, it could be this thing that I know about that's out there. Um, and then there's the light whip of it all, and he's got these scars on his back that look like whip scars, and
Mm.
that could be a thing, which I again don't. That's really dark, and that's a really dark place for Vernestra's story to go, and so for that
Yeah.
reason I don't want that to be it. But those are things I noticed.
So, Venestra, question for you,
Hmm.
since you've read all these books. Do you think, because I've been wondering this, it's hard for me to tell, given this performance, if she's like kind of a stuck up Jedi who's very rigid, or if she's actually more of a maverick but like plays her cards very close to the vest. Um,
So
Based on the lore and what you're seeing, yeah.
the latter description would make a lot more sense for the character as she's established in the books. That's not what
Hmm.
I'm seeing in this show. In the show, I'm seeing her a lot more as a like she's very concerned with politics, not necessarily in a good way. I don't know. I feel like in the books, she's a very compassionate Jedi, and I'm not seeing that from
Hmm.
her here. And also, she's making really stupid decisions. Like when Sol is like, "Oh, we have to go to Kofar to like chase after, go find May and stuff," and he's like, "Oh, what if she doesn't come peacefully?" And she's like, "Oh, I don't think it'll come to that." I'm like, "Of course it's gonna come to that. She's just been murdering Jedi all over the galaxy," and she's like, "Oh no, she'll probably just surrender and come peacefully." I'm like, "What would make you think that?"
Yeah.
So her
Um,
something about like her decision making skill, like
Also,
there's
her
some.
priorities,
Yeah.
like in the meeting at the beginning of like I think the last episode or the one
Hmm.
before, like she's all like, "Oh no, but this wouldn't look good for our Jedi
Exactly.
PR. So
Exactly.
we definitely have to prioritize this." And I'm just
Hmm.
like, I'm not here unless you are like a great pretender and you're Severus Snaping this really hard.
Hmm.
Like my impression of her is she's lost touch with reality and is
Yeah.
not good at her job or being a person.
That's what it feels like. And yeah, and
That's what it feels like.
same thing in this episode. Like when they first come in to tell her what's happened, she's on a call with some person talking about like some senator, like something like that. She's like politicking again. And it is and like some, of course some aspect of that is important for the Jedi to be like involved with like the Republic and what's going on.
Sure.
Um but it seems to have gotten to the point with her where she's overly concerned about that and less concerned about like taking care of her people and like the people of the Republic and like serving the purpose of what the Jedi are supposed to be,
Yeah.
and more concerned with how they can fit in and operate within like the politics of the High Republic. um,
Yeah. Did I feel even more like a church when we're looking at it this way than even like a police force? Like they're definitely bad
yeah.
sides of both, but
Yeah.
like I'm noticing that allegory
Hmm.
really strong looking into this
Hmm.
because I'm like, okay, so at that point that's just an organization where its intentions might have been good for 5 seconds at the
Hmm.
beginning, but all of their actions so that they could quote unquote be a thing
Hmm.
were just like let's fold and do bad things every time and just justify them.
Yeah.
Um that's like the vibe I'm getting from how she's leading the Jedi Order from her post, which is
Yeah.
unfortunate.
Yeah, it seems like, and partially, and this could be because she's pretty old. She may have just gotten really disillusioned over like decades and decades of like not being able to accomplish what she wanted to, and not being able to make the kind of changes she wanted to, or save who she wanted to, or things like that happening over and over. She might have just kind of gotten disillusioned eventually and been like, you know what, we just have to play by these rules and operate within this system, and over time just kind of like eroded her whatever sort of like optimism or compassion and like those
Yeah.
sorts of things that she had, to the point where she's now here just like, I'm just trying to ride this out and punch the clock. And like, I don't know.
Yeah. I have a
Um,
question for you about her light whip also.
yes.
So last week we touched on how we liked this. We liked how Kymir's Chimere?
I think it's pronounced chimera, which is not how I
Chimere
would have read it,
Kim
but I think chimera, it's Qimir. I would
Jason.
pronounce that Jason.
Okay, me too.
Okay.
Cool.
All right,
Okay,
cool.
so anyway, Jason from The Good Place, who's the coolest Sith ever,
Awesome.
he like had a bunch of like little moves, like using the Cortosis ore, which they talked about in
Mm-hmm.
this episode a little bit more and confirmed for everyone. Um, we talked about how he used that almost quote unquote cheat in a traditional lightsaber battle, just based on how they've always been so black and white in the past.
Mm-hmm.
Um, the lightsaber whip, as freaking cool as it is,
Mm-hmm.
also feels like it steps outside of this very rigid version of the Jedi we're
Mm-hmm.
seeing. Do you
Yes,
want to talk about how that makes her different, why she did that, how other Jedi feel about it? Yeah, all of that.
I do. I'm so glad that you asked me that question because I do want to talk about that a lot. So you may not remember this, but in our first episode of this podcast, when we were talking about Vernestra, I said that I really wanted to see her in battle at some point for a reason that
Hmm.
would become clear. And I was talking about this, and I was like, I don't want to give it
Yeah.
away, but it would be really dope for a reason that I'm thinking of that I don't want to give
Hmm.
away. And that was
Yeah.
because of her light whip. I was like, seeing that in action would be really freaking cool. I was a
Hell yeah.
little bit bummed to see that the reveal of it was just her like whipping out to kill an Umber Moth instead of whipping it out in battle, which would have been a way cooler reveal for it.
I get that they feel an obligation to tee that up, but
Hmm.
it was a shit reveal, 100%.
Yeah, I agree.
As
And
far
so
as
like
reveals go.
the way her lightsaber works, so it does function as an actual lightsaber, and then she's got like
Hmm.
a bevel on like a dial on the side of it that makes it like melt into the light whip basically. So
Okay.
if she were to be in battle and she pulls it out and it's first just a lightsaber and she's fighting with it, and then she like turns the thing and makes it a light whip and then like goes at that with it, that would have been so cool, and everybody would have been like,
So cool.
what? That's how I would have done it if I was directing the show, but I'm not, so that's okay. But anyway, yeah, and actually, now that I'm thinking about it, it reminds me of an aspect of it from the books that I kind of had forgotten about, which was that so she makes this lightsaber, the light whip, and like I said, she was sort of a Jedi prodigy. She's one of the youngest Jedi Knights. She was like 15 or 16 when she became a knight. I think 15. But she built the light whip and then she hid it from the rest of the Jedi that it could do that for a pretty long time because she was afraid that they wouldn't like it. And if I'm remembering it correctly, there was a sort of an idea among the Jedi that like messing with lightsabers in any sort of weird ways is more of a Sith thing to do. And we have seen that more in the films. Like we've got Maul's double bladed lightsaber. We've got, Kylo Ren's thing with the crossguard and like different stuff like that. Um,
Hmm.
and so that has been a thing that like any kind of deviation or like messing with the design of a lightsaber is kind of a dark side thing to do. And she was like, I really don't intend it that way. I just think that this is really useful. I wanted to see if I could do it like scientifically. I made it work. It's really neat. But she kind of really keeps that like close to her chest to like avoid anybody like coming to her about it. Um,
Unlike this random dude in the forest with her who's definitely going to gossip about it the first chance he gets.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, and
Yeah.
that was when she was like a new knight, right? And she's like,
Okay.
"Oh, I'm trying to like, impress the masters and prove that I'm like a good
Yeah.
Jedi Knight and stuff." Now it's 100 years later.
Now she can
All of her
flex.
masters that were masters when she was a Padawan are dead. So she's like, "I don't give a
Okay.
shit now. Like I'll do what I want."
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, so that is when I said earlier that I'm like, "Oh, there was never any inkling of like anything that would be a connection to her being like bad or like like a dark side leaning or anything like that." That I guess is something that's like a little bit of a hint toward that, but it really wasn't a very big part. And none of her actions or anything like that ever indicated any sort of inclination like that. So
Yeah.
um, anyway, that's the deal with the light whip.
That's cool. That's some cool background. I like that throws in there, though, the fact that she's, as much as I think the version of her we're seeing has become really rigid,
Mm-hmm.
she does have some fuck this tendencies that
Mm-hmm.
maybe will come back out. Maybe this show is about, like, her eyes need to be opened and stuff like that.
Yeah,
And
maybe.
season 2 will have more of her as a character kind of looking into the mystery of these guys.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, my thoughts on Chimere were more that, and I'm hoping for this, and it's swirling, and I've talked about it before, but the fact that he said, this threw me. He said it was a very long time ago. Like when she says, I've never heard of you, that you were a
Mm-hmm.
Jedi. I was like, okay, so how old is he? Because that's a
Mm-hmm.
very literal example. He
Right.
didn't mean it symbolically. He meant he
Right.
actually was a Jedi. And then it was long enough ago that she wouldn't have even heard of him at
Yeah,
all.
I picked up on that also, and that was another one of the hints that I was like, well, if he was Vernestra's Padawan, Vernestra's pretty old,
So
so
that could fit potentially.
yeah,
Potentially. Yeah.
potentially.
My thought was that it also supports the Abeloth theory again, and I'm hoping it
Mm,
does because that's cool. That's Filoni-verse. We love Filoni.
mm-hmm,
It fits with the mask smile, and it also fits
mm-hmm.
with his attitude of I want freedom,
Yeah.
freedom to use my power however I want, which really works with Abeloth's just I want to just be an unleashed monster. I can do these
Mm,
things. Let me
mm-hmm,
um, sort of mentality.
mm-hmm,
So I'm like, maybe he's like a fissure of Abeloth's spirit that got
mm-hmm.
into this world,
An acolyte of hers.
or an acolyte of hers, but it might be more like he was someone like Darth Bane's apprentice, and that's why he's
Mm,
interested in the power of two,
mm-hmm,
because that guy made the rule.
mm-hmm.
And if that's the case, that could also explain, like, he could be using the Force to prolong his life. So there's a couple
Yeah,
possibilities.
that's true.
I particularly like those because they would fit
Mm-hmm,
to stuff that has really been building in the canon.
mm-hmm,
Um, if it's something new and random, I'll be like, whatever. I really like your Vernestra one, though, a lot
mm-hmm.
because that fits with this whole High Republic thing. And it feels very akin to, like, a lot of stories we'd see in, like, the Legends books from before. Like, Qui-Gon had an apprentice that went to the dark side. It's
Right.
fun to see those kind of relationships where it's like, oh no, you failed the student.
Yeah,
Like,
that's always a really fascinating dynamic. And actually, in the books, also, Vernestra ends up taking a Padawan, even though she's so young. She takes a Padawan who seems like he like kind of almost goes over to the dark side, but then
mhm.
doesn't. But she's kind of like grappling with that um, idea as well. So. Or I wouldn't say almost, but he starts kind of like showing some dark side tendencies, and she has to kind of like walk him back from that. Um,
Mhm.
so yeah, that would be an interesting development. I was also thinking there's a theory that I heard which would make a lot of sense that that Chimere, that Darth Biceps is the apprentice and that he's got a master.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah, and so like because of the rule of
Yeah.
two, he would need an acolyte before he can overthrow his master. So he's trying to find an
Yeah.
acolyte so that he can overthrow his master. Who that is? It could be Plagueis.
Plagueis. It could be Plagueis or Bane. I feel
Yeah,
like.
I read the Darth Bane trilogy earlier this year, and it was amazing. It's so good.
That's sick. So there might not be room for him to be part of that if that's already, or is that an older one that they could just
It's
overwrite?
an older one that they could overwrite.
Okay.
And so yeah, I don't know if that would really fit in, but they could do it.
Yeah.
And it could be Plagueis. So yeah, there's some different theories swirling around that. Be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah. Yeah. A lot of those possibilities are great.
Yeah.
Um,
And this is like what's fun about this show is that it like gives us so much to theorize about. Like it's just dropping us all these little hints, but there's nothing that's so like, oh well, obviously it's this or like I don't know. It's like if you know enough about like other Star Wars media. There's so many different directions you could kind of take it in, so it's fun.
Yeah. It's fun to speculate. I'm glad they killed off a ton of main characters in the last
Yeah,
episode. I'm like so glad
yeah.
because I'm like, oh, they're back to crawling at a snail's pace
Mm-hmm.
again. And there's only going to be 8 episodes. I'm like, no, I want big things to happen
Mm-hmm.
every episode, like in a story like this. That's
Mm-hmm.
my preference. Um, so yeah, I'm glad that they were like, we're not afraid to kill main
Yeah.
characters. I'm like, good, keep doing that. That's great. That's good
Mm-hmm.
writing. So Osha, I like her as a potential acolyte
Yeah.
as opposed to May because May's so one dimensional.
Yeah, and it's interesting, like that we have this kind of like switcheroo going on, and even leading up to last week's episode, we've seen Osha kind of like veering a little bit more dark, and May kind of veering a little bit more light. Like from where they start in the beginning of the season, May started as like, assassin, Jedi murderer, like pretty bad dude.
Yeah,
And once she finds out Osha is alive, she's become a lot more like, I really love my sister. Like she's much more motivated by her connection to Osha, and we see her kind of softening, um, to the point up in the end of the last episode where she's like hugging her, trying to get her to like choose her and go off with her and stuff. And we see this kind of like softening of her like really caring about her sister versus Osha, um, who we see kind of hardening over the past few episodes as she like sees all these things happening, becomes really angry with her sister. She, learns that she's alive, but then she sees all the horrible things she's been doing. She's like struggling with all these emotions, which is, um, so it's been an interesting kind of like steady slope for both of them, kind of going in opposite directions. So now to have this like literal switcheroo where we've now got, them on opposite sides, it'll be interesting to see how much they like just fully switch places. Like if Osha will become the new Sith acolyte, like, and then if that happens, will May
yeah.
end up like turning to the light side, becoming a Jedi or like something, or like to kind of balance that out, bring balance to the Force, if you will.
I texted you a theory after we recorded our last one, and I think it's still kind of true, but I'm reversing part of it. I think I said I think that May was going to be like the the acolyte, and it's actually been
Mm-hmm.
about her the whole time. I now think that's less the
Mm-hmm.
case. I don't know how her story is going to resolve because she really seems to want to understand whatever. I think she already knows what Soul
Mm-hmm.
did, but she might not know the whole
Mm-hmm.
picture. So there was that in this episode. But I think more and more now that Osha is like more vulnerable and more interesting of a character to put yourself in her shoes, I think it's far more likely that when she learns the truth, and also she wasn't even like accepted into the Jedi Order, they like kicked her out. Um, and she like still has compassion for her sister, who was again doesn't matter what the Jedi did, she was going to kill her because May is an evil
Mm-hmm.
narcissist. Osha just that's not
Mm-hmm.
hitting her. She's still young. She's
Mm-hmm.
impressionable. She cares about a lot of things. So I think she's going to be very much
Mm-hmm.
seduced by the dark side.
I think she's going to be
I think
seduced by
May
Darth Biceps.
that too. Yeah, I think May's death is going to make Osha become Darth Biceps' new
Mm.
acolyte, and it was just May doesn't succeed at
Mm-hmm.
hacking it. She was interested. She was a Force user from the witches. She was interested in the dark side over the
Mm-hmm.
light side. She was very fuck the
Mm-hmm.
Jedi. She was down, but she was not hacking it.
Yeah.
And I think Osha is just like, well, here's another shot. And Osha has definitely far less talent, but might have the right like motivation and spark that her sister
Yeah.
didn't. Her sister was just so raw angry, like Darth
Yeah.
Maul.
And
Darth
that
Maul didn't
was,
work. She could be Dooku.
yeah. And that was what like Jason said, that like his mistake was with May was that he thought she wanted something more than revenge, but she
Yeah.
just wanted revenge. And
Yeah.
she was just in it for that. Um, Osha could be in it for more than that. She's not really after revenge, but she's looking for a home. She's looking for, and we've already seen him start to kind of like pull on those threads, and we see this theme coming out of like Osha has always really loved and cared about things deeply, and like, you know, he his one line that he said, "Why do you love people who can only go so far, who can't go as deep as you
Yeah.
can?" Like that idea that like he's telling her like any relationship that you have had or can have with a Jedi is going to be so one-sided because like you can love people and they can't. Um,
Yeah.
and even and like May knows that about her too, because when she's talking to Sol and pretending to be Osha, and he's like, "Oh, I notice how much you love your little pip droid," and she's like, "Oh yeah, I've always been like that with stuff," and he's like, "Yeah, I know," and so like they're kind of talking about that about Osha as like she loves stuff, and as a Jedi, you're not supposed to love
Yeah.
stuff. um,
Yeah, for as much meandering as the show did, this psychological
mhm,
component, because it's so
yeah,
seductive to say they're incapable of giving you
hmm
something
hmm
genuine.
right,
I can.
exactly,
And he probably couldn't fully with May because he was doing the mask.
right,
But he's like, well, she's already
right,
seen my face. So he can actually be genuine about what he's saying here. And he's like, I'm not fully genuine. He's
right,
like, just like May, it's contingent on
right,
you, but it's honest.
yeah,
So if there's something true in a
hmm
seduction, that's what makes it work.
yeah, and it's the same way that Palpatine manipulated Anakin. Like the way that Palpatine was able to get Anakin over to the dark side was basically by being like, I can be family to you and no one else can. And
Yeah.
Anakin was so hungry for family because his family was taken away from him,
Mm-hmm.
literally. And the
Yeah.
Jedi and Qui-Gon could have been family to him, but he was killed. And nobody else really was
Yeah.
positioned or willing to be family to him. And because he needed that, Palpatine was able to latch onto that. And we see the same thing here.
Yeah.
Osha, who was also brought in at a similar age to Anakin, who was taken from her family, who needed a family, who needed that feeling of love and connection, and wasn't able to get it from the Jedi. He's picking up on that same thing and using that to seduce her over.
She could get something fair, I think is the
Mm,
distinction in her mind that will switch her
hmm
towards him, because it's kind of unfair that her family was ripped
hmm
from her when she was trying to make a
hmm
decision. Um, it's kind of unfair that the Jedi were just like, "Oh, you're not good enough
hmm
for us," and she was probably trying her
hmm
hardest. Everything feels kind of like bullshit, and that's why she's just like your happy-go-lucky emo space mechanic
Yeah,
girl without a care in the
yeah,
world at this point. And he's just like, I'll give you a fair shot at
hmm
this. I won't be full of shit like the
yeah,
Jedi are. And it's like that is a big
yeah. I
distinction.
also think a really huge part of what he's doing here that's going to make her want to stay with him is that he's making it her choice, and she wants to
Yeah.
make choices for herself because she's gotten to make very few choices for herself. So you can see like how important it is to her to characterize her leaving the Jedi as her choice, even though it sounds like it kind of wasn't really. But she's like, no, I
Mm-hmm.
left because I wanted to. And when she first left her the coven, she had decided that she wanted to go with the Jedi, but then at the end she really didn't have that choice, was kind of taken away from her because of the disaster that happened, and then they took her and she was like, we need to go back, and they were like, no, we can't. And so she kind of had made the decision, but then it really wasn't her decision in the end. And then I think she feels like she hasn't had a lot of control over the decisions that she's made in her life. So the fact that he's like,
It's extremely disempowering what you're describing.
exactly.
Yeah.
And so like the fact that he's like, "Oh, you can go swim over to the ship if you want." Like, or you can come and like, are you hungry? Like I'll like we can go have some food, but like feel free to go. Like he's offering her.
He's being super chill. Yeah.
Yeah, he's just like, "Oh, you can kill me if you want. You can take my ship if you want. Like, you know, balls in your court. You've got the weapon. You know, do what you're going to do." Um is building up that sense in her that she's got control over her life. Which is something
Yeah.
that she's not really had before, other than when she was a happy-go-lucky ship mechanic. So,
What else is Darth Biceps doing?
uh, lifting, bro. Um, I definitely think that Osha and Darth Biceps are gonna get it on in the next episode. The
Damn.
sexual tension is crazy.
I'm not 100% convinced. I do agree the sexual tension is there, but also if they do that, what a great season 2 that would make. We've
I
never seen
know.
a dark Jedi master and apprentice like lack of trust and tension, where they're also like entangled.
It would be
That would
it would
be
be super
awesome.
interesting. And here's one of the reasons why I think that.
Which means they're not gonna do it.
Well,
Because it's great. That's what I'm saying.
This might be
Sorry.
a minor spoiler, but it's out there, so I'm
Okay.
gonna say it. I was gonna wait and talk about this if and when that time comes, but I saw an article. This is dating back at least maybe like a year ago. It was like back when they
Mhm.
were maybe first starting production for this series. Um, but an article came out talking about how they were hiring an intimacy coordinator for the show.
Mm.
And of course, everyone was like commenting on it, being like assholes and being like,
Yeah. For Star
yeah,
Wars.
well,
Yeah.
and everyone, all the like people that are, everyone who decided that they were going to shit on this show before it came out, that are like, oh, the woke crowd and blah blah blah, and you can't do anything these days, and which is all bullshit, because first of all, intimacy coordinators are super important on productions, where there's any level of intimacy.
Wait, they were upset about the fact that there were intimacy coordinators?
Yes.
That's...
Yeah, they were like, oh, PC culture, blah blah blah. It's the most bullshit.
Hold on. It's been a thing for a while.
Yeah.
And there's nothing PC about it.
People are just assholes.
It's just part of the requisite jobs for filming scenes that are sexual in nature.
Yeah, somebody paying attention to like safety and consent and like those sorts of things are hugely important.
It's a job to ensure people are okay.
Yeah.
How is that woke?
Again, the people making these comments do not give a shit about that. They just want to complain about literally everything about the show. I read all those comments. I was like, all these people making all these ridiculous, stupid arguments. I was like, you're missing the headline here, which is that there's going to be intimacy in a Star Wars show, which we have like really not seen at all. So I was like, I'm really interested in that idea and like what that's going to be like.
I was expecting that was going to be what the gripe was from these people. That's what I was that's why I was like, hold on, back this up for me a second ago, because I don't identify with that, but I understand how it's a departure from the norm. Star Wars is pretty family friendly.
Yeah, so I've been watching the series kind of with that in the back of my mind, being like, what's it gonna be? And like for a hot second, I was like, maybe it'll be Osha and Yord, because they had this little bit of like back and forth, a little bit of history. But then
in our next segment, we're calling it on Star Wars, Who's Gonna Smash? Devan, take it away this week on the episode of The Acolyte. Who do you think is gonna smash?
Definitely Chimera and Osha, for sure. They gonna smash.
I don't think there are any suspects left at
this
point.
That's the only option.
If Yord hadn't bit it like 2 seconds after he started fighting with Chimera in the last episode, I would have been like, oh, they're gonna have these two fuck. Because that's everybody's favorite freaking, what's it called, fanfiction Tumblr story. Ever since they like locked lightsabers and he was like, you, our biceps match. Our haircuts are both incredibly forward-thinking and sexy. And we have that emo thing dangling over the eye. We gonna smash. And then he was just like, no, I'm gonna break your neck. And I was just like, oh, okay, they're not gonna smash. The world would have imploded. There's a lot of hotness going on there. Gotta admit it.
That is too much hotness for the world to handle.
We dodged a bullet because no one would have been able to handle it.
Absolutely not. But like in this episode, when like when she pulls the lightsaber on him and she's got him like up against the cave wall, and then they're just like looking into each other's eyes for like a crazy long time. I'm like, the sexual tension is crazy.
The only other possibility is if someone else smashes and it's in like a flashback, and it's like, we don't even know who these characters are, or it's the moms, or it's Vernestra and somebody from the past, and she's like, and that's how I started being a dick of a Jedi.
So yeah, and I think that'll be super interesting. It'll be, because again, that's something we've not seen in our Star Wars, really, but this show has proven that it is willing to go there in ways that other Star Wars shows have not.
It does seem very, like, if it were to happen, fuck Chimera for doing it, because that's so groomy.
Yeah.
Like, there's such a disparity in terms of their, like, maturities between them. Like, she's so vulnerable. I'd be just like, fuck that guy. Like, Yeah.
Yeah.
But it would be such an interesting dynamic to explore. I almost wish it were happening with two dark side users that were both like
Yeah.
close in mature comparability. Like if this happened with someone like Asajj Ventress
That's what I
or
was just
someone
gonna
else,
say. Yeah.
because it'll still happen. This that I'm about to say will still happen, but
Mhm.
I feel like it won't be as interesting when the grooming aspect is happening. Maybe it will. Maybe it'll be kind of like HBO's Made for
That's what
Love.
I'm wondering. Yeah, how it's getting there, because I was thinking that, like I said, I've been thinking that like through this episode, but as I'm watching like the dynamic between the two of them, I'm like, I don't like it because of the dynamic.
Yeah, it's definitely a cringe dynamic,
Yeah.
but I think you're onto something. Um, what about Venestra's hyperspace visions?
Oh yeah, so there's a little it's just a little comment, but this also ties in a bit to the books. So when they're preparing to go to Kofar, and the other guy, I forget his name, is like, "Oh, you're coming?" And she's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna go." And he's like, "Oh, but you don't like to go and but I thought you get sick when you go in hyperspace." And she's like, "No, I don't get sick. I find it unsettling." And he's like, "All right, whatever." And then they go.
Hmm.
But in the books, she gets these really intense hyperspace visions, and so sometimes it does make her like really take her out of it, or like really drain her, or make her feel kind of sick. She'll get like bad headaches or like something like that. I can't remember exactly the details, um, but that is a thing that occurs. So are they going to do something with that? Was that just a little aside for like, oh, for people who read the books kind of thing? Is that going to come more into play? Who knows? But just thought I'd throw that out there. I was also wondering, the planet that they're on reminds me a lot of Acto, the planet where Luke Skywalker retires to.
The planet that Chimere is on.
Yeah, the mysterious
Yeah,
island planet that Chimera is on.
yeah, I've seen that in some articles, which it bothers me because it's connected to the bad trilogy. But at least it tracks in terms of their like this is the planet where apparently the Force was first discovered. I don't know how canon that is in all the different lores, but
I'm
that
not
would be
sure. I don't know
interesting.
about that, but I know there's like, there's this part of the planet that's got like that's really really steeped in dark side energy. So depending on
Hmm.
what happens here, this could be like setting that up. I don't know. Could be a thing.
Okay.
Although we don't
I
see any
also
porgs, we have these little like anteater ducks. But
the weird pools in the rocks
hmm
that he was at reminds me a lot of the planet with the Mentalics, which is the second time something's reminded me of this thing from season 2 of Foundation.
oh, I haven't
Um,
seen that.
yeah, you really got to. You'd really appreciate it. Um, but yeah, there's a whole arc where like they're holding somebody prisoner in one of those pools in the
Mm,
second season, and it looks
interesting.
like very reminiscent. So I'm like wondering where in Canada this was shot.
Yeah,
I don't know.
I was gonna look up where it was shot because I was like that would give me a clue
Yeah.
if they filmed it at Skellig, I think is the name of the island off of the coast of Ireland where they shot Acto.
Hmm.
Um,
Oh, cool.
I just looked it up and it looks like this was filmed off the coast of Portugal. So not
Hmm.
exactly the same island, although
Not exactly the same. But a lot of factors could affect that. They could be like, we're still going for Octo, but
yeah,
in our budget, we're doing Portugal instead for X, Y, and Z
yeah, because
reasons.
I think they also filmed. I think they also filmed Kofar there, like in the jungle.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
maybe just from a quick glance at this, so they might have needed. It looks like they needed an island that had like a lot of different environments that they could use.
Yeah.
So maybe that fit the bill. Anyway, I'm just rambling on about that.
Silly question?
Silly question.
Cool. This week, if you are a Force teacher at a Force institution, whether it be Jedi or Sith, what would the subject be that you teach?
Do you want to go first?
Sure. So I definitely think if I was teaching something, I probably wouldn't have the patience for something like math or something like that.
No.
Um,
Do Jedi even need to know math?
no, I mean I wanted to say jumping, but then I'm like, then I'm just a PE teacher. Like that would really resonate
Although,
with me
like,
as like someone. Yeah,
Jedi PE teacher would be pretty fun.
I think I'd suck at it because when I'm at the gym and like people who are new ask me how do you do this, I'm not always good at like explaining what the feeling is like
Hmm
to like make a physical move. So I
Yeah.
was just like, I'd actually be a terrible jumping teacher. I'd absolutely be terrible. So I'm just like, I think I would just be what I would be normally, which is a history teacher. I would be your what's it called? Most stereotypical history and philosophy teacher ever. All of the other Jedi would hate me. They'd be like, "You're always poisoning their minds with ideas that like we're bad and things like that." And I'm like, "But they love me because I'm funny."
Then be
And I
less
just
bad.
tell them what's up. Yeah, yeah. I think I would
Yeah,
be the
I
Jedi
could see
history
that.
teacher.
I can
Yeah,
see that.
and it would be just like any other history teacher,
Hmm.
and I'd go on rants.
Obviously.
Yeah.
that
So
tracks.
I literally thought I was going to be a jumping teacher until I started talking, and I was like, "No, I would just be a history teacher." I was just like, "This is stupid. I could be that. I would be. That's what I'd be doing." Yeah. So, what's yours?
Mine, as soon as I say it, you're going to be like, "Oh yeah, of course, that makes sense." I
Hmm.
would do the class in teaching them how to build lightsabers.
Ah. Okay.
Because I love making things. I was like, what's the closest thing to an art teacher? I was like, what
Yeah.
forms of like art do the
That's
Jedi
so
make? And there's
clever.
some like different stuff, but I was like, oh, lightsaber making. Like I've literally made
Yeah.
lightsaber hilts for like
Yeah.
costume props and stuff. I've made some really cool ones. So I've done that. I love like making and building stuff.
There's good guiding in that though too.
Yeah, and then like it was like actual lightsabers, the whole thing about the crystals and like different materials and like there's so much
Yeah.
and then it's like you have to
Which one
use
reflects you, your personality?
yeah,
You
helping
know.
students like find the how to make their own and like guiding them through that and then there's like you have to like use the force to actually make it, so there's a cool force component. So I think that that would be the right Jedi teacher role for me.
Yeah, that would be great. Well, that's our show. Thanks for listening.
We will be posting new episodes whenever we get them done at whenever they're ready. May the force be with you.